Come on in, Grace Point, stand and let's sing together. Yeah.
From the day it all began, the scars that made me who I am.
Let's do that.
Can we start that again? You're the soul who understands the scars that made me who I am. Through the drifting sands of time, I got your back and you got mine. If you bear a heavy load, I'll be the wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through thick and thin, for love and loss until the end.
Come on, sing with us.
And you carried me with you from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. It's true. You carried me with you. From the day it all began, yeah, you were there, you took my hand. And when I've hurt a bit too deep, you watched me as I fell asleep. And when my head was in the clouds, you found a way to pull me out. Picked my heart up off the ground and showed me love was all around. And you carry me with you from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. Yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. Oh, we'll be sitting on the world together, watching as the days turn into nights. And we know how to brave the stormy weather. We're never giving up without a fight. If you should ever bear a heavy load, I'll be your wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through the thick and thin, for love and loss until the end. And you carried me with you from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. Yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. Oh, you carried me with you.
Yes. Thank you, Cassie. Oh, we're so glad you're with us. We love it when you're here. And we love it when all of you are here. Thank you so much for being with us at Grace Point today, where you are safe, you are seen, you are loved and celebrated exactly how you are. We just love that you're with us. We've got a special guest. Well, she's not a guest. She's a friend of ours. Kat is going to be speaking today with her amazing new book. We've got lunch after. Hopefully y'all signed up for that. So we're going to be a great day. Glad you're here. Let's sing. If you're lost and you're lonely, go and figure out why. Take a trip to your dark side. Go on and have a good cry. 'Cause we're all lonely, and we're all lonely together. I wanna see your sadness. I wanna be let in. I want to share your joy, and I want to be your friend. Don't we all just want to be together. Oh, yeah. So leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Yes. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Yeah. So if your face is down, take a look around. Do your fingers move? Do your lungs inflate? Are you tired? Are you weary of the hidden hate you've been holding? Yeah. Did you lose that love, or have you never had it? Are you feeling sad 'cause you did a bad thing? Whoa. What's heavy behind? Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Oh, are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? The only way to lose that fearful feeling, replace it with love that's healing. Are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? Oh, leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. What's heavy, what's heavy behind. Come on, y'all sing it. Leave what's heavy. What's heavy behind? What's heavy behind? Yeah, one more time. Leave what's heavy. What's heavy behind? Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all can be seated.
Good morning, Grace Point. Good morning. It is great to see you. Isn't it great to have Cassie up here? Oh my gosh. What a Thanksgiving treat. Thanks so much. We are so glad you're here today, especially if you're joining us for the first time. If we haven't met, my name's Josh Scott. I'm the lead pastor here, and we're just thrilled you're here. If you haven't yet, in just a minute, we're going to have some time to greet one another. We'd love for you to go back, grab some coffee, grab a donut, talk to Jean, who is just ready to talk to you and excited. So, yeah, do that. I want to share a few announcements with you real quick before we do that. First, everything you need you can get to by scanning this QR code. So if you're here for the first time or you never have, we would love for you to fill out the connection card. Just lets us know who you are, what you're interested in getting involved in here at Grace Point, what you would like more information about here at Grace Point. And so scan that, and it'll take you everywhere you need to go to find out. You can also get our weekly newsletter here. It's a great way to stay informed about what's happening. That comes out on Thursdays or Fridays usually. Tells you what's happening on the weekend, but also gives you a longer picture of what's coming so you can align your calendar with the things you want to be a part of. Our volunteer of the week could be you. It could be you. The only thing standing between you and achieving volunteer of the week status is you haven't volunteered yet. But that could change today. So if you would like to get plugged in, if you scan that QR code just a minute ago, it'll take you to a place where you can sign up for Grace Point Teams. Grace Point Teams is everything from setup and tear down to helping with coffee, to helping with hospitality, helping with greeting, all those sorts of things, helping with Grace Point Kids, all of those things. So we would love for you to get involved here. We also, next Sunday, will be voting to approve our 2 Leadership Council nominees, Scott and Bonnie. And if you get the newsletter, there's a bio for both of them in there, and you can get to know them even better as they get ready to come on for a 3-year term on leadership. And then finally, December 7th, we have two things going on here that are going to be really, really fantastic. One is Brian Recker is going to be here. How many of you know Brian Recker? He just released a book called Hellbent. And so on the second Sunday of Advent, when we usually talk about peace, we're going to have a conversation about peace and how in the world a religion that began announcing peace on earth ended up talking about things like hell. And so that's going to be a lot of fun having Brian here. And then also on the 7th, we have our Christmas potluck. And we would love for you to be a part of that. Both of you are welcome. I'm so glad that both of you are coming. This Christmas potluck, Grace Point is going to provide the main course. We're asking our community to bring sides and or desserts. And you can also sign up for that on that same QR code. Can we throw that back up there real quick just to give people a chance? I was raised Baptist, and so the altar call doesn't end right away. You have to keep going. And so this is the altar call today. Scan this, and you can find out everything. You can sign up for everything. And then finally, one of the only way we exist and function as a community is through the generous giving of our members. And so we require that to survive. And as we get to the end of the year, we're looking at next year. You may hear people talk about year-end giving being important, and it really is, because year-end giving allows us to start the next year strong. So if you value Grace Point, if you benefit from Grace Point, we would love for you to consider partnering with us in this way. You can text any dollar amount to that phone number right there on the screen. You can give online at gracepoint.net/give, or you've never heard this before, you can scan that QR code. When you scan that QR code, it'll take you right to a page to give. So can we do one thing real quick before we greet one another? Can we welcome the online community who are on YouTube right now? Fantastic. All right, say hi to one another. We'll be back in just a minute. Hello, there we go. I did forget to mention one thing, and that is thank you. You all have been incredible this month. We've collected food all month long to support folks during this difficult time that we've been going through as a country. And we had so much food donated, I can't even begin to quantify how much food y'all brought. And we also collected some clothing for our unhoused neighbors. And Dennis said we had almost 25 bags of clothing donated for that. So incredible month of giving, Grace Point. We are so proud of you. Thank you so much. And I am thrilled to have my friend Kat here, Kat Armas, this week to talk about her new book. We are going to make a little adjustment to sort of what we advertise. Kat's going to come up in just a little bit and share the sermon, and it's going to be a little shorter than a usual sermon. And then I'm going to come up and we're going to have a dialogue. We're going to do that. The online community won't miss any of it. Everybody will get to experience it. And then afterward, we're going to have some lunch available. And everybody, whether you signed up or not, feel free to stick around and enjoy some food with us, all right? So this week being Thanksgiving week, we wanted to take some time and go through sort of a liturgy of thanks. And what this is going to look like, I'm going to invite you in your chair to get really comfortable. I'm not going to invite you to close your eyes because you won't be able to see the screen unless you have a superpower that I do not have. And so what this will look like is we'll put up, let's go ahead and put the first slide up there. It'll say leader and then people. I'll read the part of leader, and I'll invite you to say together the part of the people. Does that make sense? All right, let's just start by taking a couple of deep breaths. For the gifts we receive, for breath in our lungs, and hope that stirs even quietly. For the land we gather upon, long stewarded by indigenous peoples, whose wisdom and story we honor. For food that nourishes, for hands that plant, harvest, prepare, and serve. For community, messy, imperfect, and beautiful, where we're learning to love beyond fear and belong without condition. For every story in this room, joyful stories, heavy stories, healing stories, and stories still being written. For the divine presence, found not far away, but in one another, in the shared table and in the widening circle. For the work of justice that calls us forward, and for the grace that holds us when we grow weary. For gratitude itself, not a denial of pain, but a witness to beauty and possibility. May our gratitude become action, our abundance become sharing, and our kindness become change. I'm going to turn it over to Stan for communion.
What a perfect segue as we go to the Lord's Supper. In 1 Corinthians 12, or rather 11, the Apostle Paul talked about the Lord's Supper, and he said some things that I grew up with, very afraid of. He told the church, he said, when you come together and receive the Lord's Supper, he said, the way you're doing it, essentially, in a Eugene Peterson type paraphrase, The apostle said, the way you're doing it, it would have been better for you not to do it. As a matter of fact, he said it would have been better for you not to have even to have come to church. And then he explained something that's a bit cryptic for those of us 2,000 years removed, but he said there was something happening in Corinth at the Lord's Supper. He said there were people coming with an abundance of food. It was like a potluck of sorts. A lot of scholars looking back, retrofitting as much as we can through the window of present day, it seemed that there was a Lord's Supper that was connected to what they referred to as the love feast, and it was a glorified potluck. It was literally the first church potluck. Anybody ever been to those? The first church, or the first early church received the Lord's Supper, but they would do it out of a meal. And the thought is, because Jesus moved into the first Eucharist out of a meal, and it was the Passover meal. It was the Passover meal, and then he took remnants from the meal as he looked around the table and instituted the Lord's Supper. And so the early church, in doing the Lord's Supper, thought it would be good to move casually from a meal that they called the love feast. And this wonderful potluck somehow, referencing back to what Josh said a moment ago, a religion supposedly vested in the idea of peace, and so quickly we moved to things like judgment and hell. I remember one of my heroes, Tony Campolo, and Brian McLaren wrote a book one time called Adventures in Missing the Point. But in the ultimate adventure of missing the point, Paul said that there were people who were coming to the feast with loads of food, and there were people who were coming without. They were bereft of food. And Paul said somehow in that exchange, those who brought the food ate the most, and those who came without food felt embarrassed, humiliated, estranged. And Paul said it this way, and whether it was an emotional caricature, it pointed to something terrible. Paul said people were leaving the Lord's Supper, and some were drunk and some were hungry. Some had gluttonized at the table while others felt that they didn't belong there and they didn't even eat. And then Paul said, in doing that, you have not discerned the Lord's body. And then he said something incredibly scary for my ears growing up in the little Holiness Pentecostal church where we did communion once a year. And there was a 3-hour service leading up to it where we searched our heart, because Paul had said, if you don't discern the Lord's body properly, you will eat the Lord's Supper, leading to sickness and death in yourself. And so the way we took that in fundamentalist circles was, if you didn't get all of the sins confessed, and if you had anything going on in your heart that was wrong, you took the Lord's Supper, and what was supposed to give life would turn poison on you in some divine trick. And all of that was so incredibly, horribly scary. But now looking back through the lens of Jesus, I realize that it's so much simpler than that and so different than the surmisal that I had made and so many made. In 1 Corinthians 11 through 14, Paul introduced us to the idea that the Lord's body is not that ascended being that is the second person of a Trinity, still connected to a resurrected body sitting at the right hand in a divine throne room. The Lord's body, he said, is the single... The Lord's body is the single parent sitting beside you that can't figure out how they're going to keep their heat on this winter. Paul made it clear the Lord's body is not some mystical being in the heavens. The Lord's body is every human being we meet, and especially those who are in need. And Paul said, in the process of eating and gluttonizing and leaving people out, Paul said it would have been better for you just not to have come to church at all. So in the taking of the Lord's body and the connection to the Lord's life, this is not supposed to cast our hearts and eyes heavenward, trying to figure out some mystical, complex Trinity. These little pieces of bread and the grape juice, the wine, is supposed to point us to one another. And this is the ultimate discernment of the Lord's body. And someone said, well, what did he mean that when we don't do that properly, we bring into our body sickness and even death? When human beings don't discern the Lord's body, when we don't discern those who are without, not just at Thanksgiving, but throughout the year, we are indeed bringing death. And it might not be a death immediately to me, but it is a death immediately to a part of my body, which is the other sitting beside me. That, brothers and sisters, is the Lord's Supper. So what a wonderful time at Thanksgiving to be sharing with others and coming to this table and opening our hearts to a body of Christ that's bigger than we ever knew and is sitting beside us and with us even today. So to that end, let's still our hearts, close our eyes, our feet on the ground, our hearts opened, not simply to the heavens, but to those that are near us, to feel the tensions, the celebrations, the grief, the heartache, to feel the needs of those with us here and abroad, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Darfur, to feel the body of Christ, to feel the heart that skips a beat, to feel the heart that slows from hunger. This is to discern the Lord's body. We pray these things in the name of the one who gave his name to us, Christ. May we discern the Lord's body today, we pray. Amen. Let's stand together and let's recite this creed that so embodies everything that I just tried to say. And then after we read this, we'll come and take and bring your families with you. Let's read together, good and heartily. Come to this table, you who have much faith, and you who struggle with believing, you who have been here often, and you who have come for the first time, you who are at peace, and you who feel despair. We are all part of the human family, and there is a place for us here. Christ invites everyone to the table. May this bread and wine unite us all. Amen.
Good morning, Grace Point. I am just getting myself together for a second, and also so happy to be here. This community is so special to me and has been in the last year, and so really it's an honor to be able to celebrate this new work with you that came out 2 weeks ago, and so yeah, it's just so fun. Yeah, so thank you so much for celebrating it with me. So before I begin, I actually want to read a little reflection from the book. And this is a story told by the Quechua people about a hummingbird. There was once a time when the great forest caught fire. The flames roared and the smoke billowed, and all the animals fled in fear. Gathering at the edge of the forest, they watched as their home burned and burned. "What can I do?" cried Buck. "This fire is so big, and I am so small," howled Fox. Among them hovered a tiny hummingbird, her beak the size of a honeybee. She flew to a nearby stream, picked up a single drop of water, and flew back, dropping it into the fire. She made her way back and forth from the stream to the flames, carrying one drop at a time, over and over. The other animals watched, confused. Finally, Bear asked her, "Little hummingbird, what are you doing?" The hummingbird looked at the animals and said, "I am doing what I can. Those who have ears, let them hear." So, as I'm sure you guessed, today I will be talking about empire, right? Which is not, in our cultural climate, a novel concept or topic. But I want to do something fun, and I want to preach on a passage that has sort of come back into my consciousness in the last few months, a favorite among the evangelicals, and you may have seen it recently floating around on memes connected to a specific political figure. Who will go unnamed, but it's just been floating around, right? It is a verse that has been used across the board in colonial and modern mission endeavors, a sort of commissioning verse for the people of God. And that is Isaiah's famous passage, "Here I am, send me," right? I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, and if you're not, I will give some context to it, no worries. But you might be wondering, why in the world would I want to stand up here and talk about empire and talk about a verse that has been used to harm? Well, as I'm sure you understand the response, that is what it means to resist empire, right? To take a thing, a text, a law, a doctrine, an idea, you name it, that has been used to wound or justify abuse and reimagine it. Right? To refuse to let empire have the last word. We dare to tell a different story, right? We hold up these things, these ideas, these laws, these systems, we hold them up to the light, and we ask, what truth might still be hidden here? What freedom, what invitation? And this leads us straight into the heart of what empire is, right? Straight to the heart of empire itself. Because if there's one thing I've learned about empire, it's that it's skilled at crafting the narrative, right? The systems that inhabit our world, the systems of greed, the systems of violence, these begin as stories. Stories that empire tells about itself, about reality, about wisdom, about divinity. These narratives, they sink so deep into us, our cultures, our imaginations, that they eventually become ideologies, and then ideologies that justify domination and control. And then these ideologies calcify into systems that dehumanize. And empire does this in cunning ways because empire is all about the facade, the illusions it wants us to believe. Because you see, empire doesn't always shout. oftentimes it whispers. It seeps into our language, our theology, our worship, our very sense of self, until empire's logic begins to feel like divine truth. You see, empire spins stories about violence and hierarchy, dualism and dominance. It convinces us that dignity is something to be earned rather than already woven into our being. It tells us that some lives matter more than others, that for one person to rise, another must fall, that power must always flow downward, that strength requires domination, that peace can only come through the sword. It teaches us to fear difference, right? To flatten nuance, dividing the world into saved and lost and sacred and profane, worthy and unworthy, rich and poor, enlightened and barbarian, binaries that distort the divine image in us all. Empire convinces us we must always be producing, right? Always optimizing. It disguises exhaustion as virtue. It calls striving faithfulness, overwork, devotion, right? Burnout, sacrifice, ambition, holiness. It tells us our worth is measured by our output, that slowing down is failure, that our bodies exist to serve the machine rather than to experience delight. Empire baptizes us in the gospel of hustle, the religion of scarcity. It promises belonging, but only if we keep up, right? Like only if we buy in. And these narratives, they settle quietly into our hearts, our minds, our bodies, becoming the very air we breathe. They're normalized until they sound sacred. And in the wake of these narratives and ideologies, we're left asking the most human of questions, the kind of questions that cut to the heart of who we are and how we live with one another. Like the lawyer who asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Right? A question about belonging, about how far love must reach, or questions like the one Jesus himself asked on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" A question that rises when the world feels too heavy to bear alone. And these questions, right, the ones about love and abandonment, about belonging and despair, they're not abstract. They're flesh, and they are blood, and they are formed by the world we live in. Right? They're shaped by the systems, the ones that decide whose suffering matters and whose doesn't, who is or isn't worthy of God's presence. And that's because empire doesn't just govern land, it governs imagination. This is what I mean when I talk about the illusions of empire, the way it convinces us that the way things are is the way that they must be. You see, empire thrives by distorting our perception. It numbs us into believing that what is common is what is right, that the systems we inherit are the only possible world. But friends, illusions only work if we forget they're illusions, right? Like they depend on our participation. And that's why unlearning empire begins not with tearing down monuments, although yes, that is part of it, but it begins with awakening our sight, with doing the internal work of learning to see through the facade, to imagine something beyond it. Because if empire has taken root in us, in our imaginations, then resistance, it must begin there too. You see, before we can dismantle empire out there, we must first be liberated in here. And this struggle, right? Like this struggle to be free, friends, it's as old as time. All throughout the Hebrew scriptures, we hear the echoes of empire in the laments and the songs of defiance and the prophets warning the people, do not become the thing they fled. From Moses to Daniel to Esther, from the wilderness to Babylon, God's people continuously wrestle not only with power, but with remembering who they are when empire tries to name them otherwise. Because deliverance it doesn't erase the ache of what once confined us, right? Like the hierarchies we've absorbed, they don't just vanish overnight, right? The urge to control, to compete, to dominate, to commodify, oh, these impulses, they remain. Why? Because empire doesn't surrender easily. And when you live too long in its shadow, you begin not only to think like it, but to replicate it. Not out of malice usually, but because it's familiar, right? I think about this often, especially as a parent. Now, I'm grateful for my Cuban upbringing, for the stories of survival that formed me. And I write about this in my first book, in Abuelita Faith, right? The beauty of a grandmother faith, the kind of faith that makes something out of nothing, that sings in the dark, that knows an embodied hope. Yet, being fully human also means facing the colonial wounds that came with that inheritance. It means naming where hierarchies, right, where violence, control, patriarchy, machismo, among other things, have shaped our families and our ways of being. I'm learning that healing from these systems, from the things that have been passed down to me from my elders, doesn't dishonor their sacrifice or their lived experience. No, it honors the fullness of who we are as humans, right? Complex, broken, whole, healing. Because love isn't silence. Love tells the truth, right? It grieves what was broken, even as it gives thanks for what was beautiful. To live into freedom is to receive the gifts of our ancestors with one hand, and with the other, to gently lay down the harm that they could not name. That, too, friends, is resurrection work. It is the holy work of becoming. Isn't this the paradox of being alive, right? The tension of holding complexity in a world that demands simplicity. Empire prefers its neat categories, right? It's black and white thinking because it keeps us safe. But we are not simple people. We are beautifully messy, as we read earlier, still learning how to unlearn. And when I catch myself repeating old patterns, echoes of generational wounds, I remember that spiritual and emotional growth isn't about achieving some sort of purity, right? Which is in and of itself this imperial idea, right? The need to arrive and conquer at whatever it is, at enlightenment or at the stages of grief, right? Or to be pure in the dominant culture's eyes. No, growth is about honesty, friends. It's about integrity. It's about staying awake. You see, decolonizing our hearts isn't about moral perfection, but about seeing ourselves clearly. The same clarity that reveals empire out there must also expose its patterns within, right? Its patterns in here, the ideologies, the fears, the inherited narratives that shape how we engage with ourselves, with each other, and with divinity. And through it all, the God who led the people out of Egypt and into the wilderness still leads us into new ways of being, of loving, of raising the next generation. You see, it is the wilderness that becomes Moses' teacher, right? We tend to imagine the wilderness as a place of darkness or desolation, but in the wilderness of Midian, far beyond Pharaoh's walls, it becomes a place of transformation. It's there, in an ungoverned land where nothing belongs to empire, not the people, and certainly not the land, where Moses is stripped of his power, of his status, of his privilege, and it's there that he can see clearly. In fact, he becomes a shepherd, learning what empire could never teach him, things like humility, dependence, care. You see, friends, when Moses fled Egypt after killing the taskmaster, he wasn't just running from Pharaoh, he was entering a place where Pharaoh's logic could not follow him. For 40 years, he unlearned the rhythms of empire, discovering that holiness is born not of hierarchy, not of perfection, but of presence. And only then, before the burning bush, does God call him to set the people free. Because before Moses can liberate others, he must first be liberated himself. But even then, standing before the flame, you can hear the smallness that empire had etched into his bones even after 40 years of unlearning. At the moment of his calling, Moses still voices every lie empire taught him. I am not enough. I'm not capable. I don't have the words. And you know what I love? That God listens, right? Like God doesn't shame or dismiss his fear and uncertainty. Instead, God meets him right there in the place of his unlearning, and he says, I will be with you. Because ridding ourselves of empire's lies, friends, takes a lifetime. But thanks be to God, God is patient with us. And maybe, just maybe, that means we can be patient with each other too. And the same was true for the Israelites, right? After escaping Pharaoh's grip, they spent 40 years in the wilderness, slowly detoxing from empire's logic, slowly unlearning its rhythms, slowly remembering how to breathe again after 40 or after generations of holding their breath. Through manna, they learned to trust abundance instead of scarcity. Through God's commands, they learned not to oppress as they had once been oppressed. 40 years of relearning how to live as free people. And only after that long inner work does God say, now you're ready for the promised land. Because the story of God's people has never been only about liberation from an external empire. It's always been about the deeper work, about liberation from the fears, the desires, the habits of thought that kept them bound. And this too is our story, isn't it, friends? We who live in a culture that tells us how to be, what to buy, and whom to trust for wisdom, we too must enter the wilderness and let it do its holy work in us until we are free enough to help others be free. Until our hearts remember what Pharaoh made us forget, that God's abundance, it's already here, right? That God's presence, it's already among us. That true liberation begins not in the center of empire, but in the wilderness places, right? In the margins where the Spirit teaches us how to breathe again. And so, with all of this in our bones, right? The wilderness work, the unlearning, the slow detox from empire's logic, we finally step into our passage for today, the one that I mentioned in the beginning, Isaiah 6. And I'll go ahead and read it for you. I think it'll also be up on the screen. So in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a high and exalted throne. The edges of his robe filling the temple, winged creatures were stationed around him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they veiled their faces, with 2 their feet, and with 2 they flew about. They shouted to each other, saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of heavenly forces. All the earth is filled with God's glory. The doorframe shook at the sound of their shouting, and the house was filled with smoke. I said, Mourn for me, I'm ruined. I'm a man with unclean lips, and I live among a people with unclean lips. Yet I've seen the King, the Lord of heavenly forces. Then one of the winged creatures flew to me, holding a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. He touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt has departed, and your sin is removed. Then I heard the Lord's voice saying, Whom should I send, and who will go for us? I said, I'm here. Send me. Right from the very first line, we're sort of invited into the tension here. The year that King Uzziah died. So this was a time when empire was sort of shifting, right? The king had just died. The markets were wavering. The people were afraid of what would become of their safety, right? Their borders. It was a time when empire trembled. And in the midst of this political uncertainty, when earthly thrones are shaky, that Isaiah sees the Lord. He sees God high and lifted up. And if you notice, God is exalted with a glory that is not propped up by armies or weaponry, but by a presence that sings. And it's also a glory that doesn't cling to a single palace, but one that fills the whole earth. I like to think that this moment, this sort of vision that Isaiah sees, is a decolonizing of Isaiah's imagination, right? Like revealing a power that refuses to mirror empire, one that looks different, that sounds different. And standing in the presence of this otherworldly holiness, Isaiah does what every honest person does when the veil lifts. Friends, when the illusion shatters, Isaiah tells the truth about himself. I am a man of unclean lips. See, this confession, it's about formation, isn't it? Isaiah recognizes that his language, his words, the very tools of a prophet have been colonized. Standing in God's presence, he names the empire within, the hierarchies he's absorbed, the narratives he's inherited, the ideologies, the propaganda, the religious slogans that bless injustice and call it peace. He names how it's shaped him. I'm a man of unclean lips. Because, friends, empire, it settles into our speech long before it settles into our laws. And just like Moses, God meets him right there. A burning coal touches his lips, not to punish him, but to free him, burning away the lies he's internalized and making space in his imagination for a new way of speaking, of being, not shaped by Pharaoh or Uzziah or Caesar, but by a God whose presence fills the entire earth. And only then does Isaiah hear the question echo through the room, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Friends, this is not the commissioning of a polished missionary ready to conquer new lands. This is the dangerous invitation to prophetic resistance. Because to say yes will put Isaiah at odds with every system that benefited from his silence. Because saying yes to God's vision always puts us at odds with the visions of empire. And still, Isaiah says, here I am, send me. Not send me to seize power, not send me to uphold the very structures that wounded my people, but send me to tell the truth. Send me to unmask the lies. Send me to speak of a world where glory fills the earth, not through conquest, but through communion. Not through domination, but through deliverance. Not through empire, but through Emmanuel. Because in the end, friends, I think Isaiah 6 is about imagination. It's about unlearning the world empire taught us to see and learning to speak, finally speak with lips liberated for love. It is the moment Isaiah discovers what I've been saying all along. Before God sends us out to confront the empire out there, we must first confront the empire in here, or else, friends, we risk recreating the very systems we long to dismantle. Only when we step into this liberating work can we see what Isaiah saw, what generations before him struggled to understand, that the story of Scripture, it was never about us establishing a ruler. It was always about forming a people. Even after their deliverance, right? The Israelites longed for what was familiar. They desperately wanted a king to carry forth their hopes and values so they wouldn't have to live it out themselves. But God's covenant was never meant to rest on a throne. It was always meant to take shape in shared life, in a community bound not by hierarchy or violence, but by justice and mercy, not by fear, but by love. And isn't this what makes Jesus so bewildering, right? Like so beautifully confounding? If kings rise by conquest and rule by force, what in the world do we do with a Messiah who refuses both? Who refuses, right, to grasp at power? He doesn't build armies or grand ballrooms. He doesn't reinforce borders or seize land or tax the people. Instead, Jesus gathers them. How? Through presence. Around an ordinary table where rich and poor, where citizen and foreigner, where worthy and unworthy sit side by side, where belonging isn't earned, bought, or proven, but received as grace. Friends, Jesus does not build another empire. He reveals what it means to live free of one. And the story, right? This whole sweeping story of Scripture has never been about a single ruler. It has always been about us, a people learning how to belong to one another, to embody the freedom that God has already declared over us. You see, the change that we long for in the world, it begins right here in the slow, sacred work of transformation within. One small act of courage, one honest confession, one drop of water in the fire at a time. So friends, let us be like the hummingbird, right? Small but steadfast, tending to the flames of justice and the work of love, building the world we dream of, the world God intended together. Amen. All right, I think, Josh, you're going to come up here so we can chat. Yeah.
So Kat, when one of the things I want to talk to you about, and you sort of allude to it in what you just shared, which, first of all, y'all have to buy this book and read it. It is a book for the moment, because we are living in the collapse of empire, and it doesn't go down pretty, right? Empire collapses with a lot of collateral. One of the things that you sort of alluded to, and we had this conversation recently, was I think one of the ways empire shows up in even our efforts to try to break from empire is that we want like the 3 steps we can take.
Yeah.
Can I get like a 5-point bullet plan for how to leave empire behind?
Right.
And that's really not how it works. Could you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah. So something that I, after 2020, even say I'm like, what was that? But even after that, I think because in our collective conversation, so many folks were waking up to all the things, right? Like all the things. There was this push of like, tell me what to read and I'll read it. Tell me what documentaries to watch and I'll watch it. Tell me who to follow and I'll follow them because I want to be anti-racist. Great. I think that's great. And we were sharing lists and things, and I think that's awesome. And I think we're still kind of there, right? But what I'm trying to argue with in this book is that empire is so deeply woven into everything how we understand reality, how we think to commodify our time, everything, that there's really no 5-step, it's kind of like the 5 steps over 7 steps of grief, right? You're going to get to the end and you're not going to grieve anymore. I mean, it's so much more complicated than that. And I think, I kind of want to pull us out of this, tell me how to resist empire and I'll do it. Where do I go? Who do it starts here, right? Like it really starts with what are the ideologies that you've inherited, the things, and for all of us, it's different, right? I mean, for me, one of the things that my family, we so desperately desired was to slow down, right? Because we live in this culture of constant hustle. And so one of the decisions that we made was to move out to a farm and like learn how to be farmers, which is just such a bizarre thing for me, considering where I grew up. But that's just our personal convictions and desires and longings, right? And so I invite folks like, what are your convictions and desires and longings? Like, where has empire? Where do you feel its tentacles mostly on, on your body, in your mind, in your heart? And yeah, how can you begin to take these, literal drops into the fire? And I always say, empire is so big and injustice is so vast. And it almost feels like, what in the world can we do? And there's like this weird liberation in that because there's literally so much you can do, right? Like, it's just so big that there's so many ways to resist. You go out and you march and you protest and you do all of that 100%. And also, you investigate the ways that empire has taken a hold of your heart. And how are the ways that you can begin to rid yourself of these things? You know, for me, it's so much of it comes out of my parenting because I have 2 toddlers and, you know, takes forever to put shoes on in the morning. So we just have to, you know, work through so many different things. But no, I say all that to say that there are so many ways to resist. And it's not tell me what book to read. You know, it's funny, sorry, I'll stop talking now. But
You're supposed to be the one talking.
I know, but I can go on forever. But yeah, since the book has released, you know, I've been doing interviews and podcasts, and folks have asked me, like, so what's like the one thing you can tell folks? And I'm like, take a stock of your entire life. You know, start there, like just start. And people don't want that. You know, they're kind of like, oh, okay, no, but for real, what's one thing? No, I don't know, because I don't know you. This is like a personal journey. So yeah, anyways.
And you mentioned the story of Moses and his time in Midian, in the wilderness, and then the Israelites, their time.
Right.
In the Gospels, we have Jesus spending 40 days in the wilderness. And those temptations that show up really are about what kind of Messiah.
Right.
Are you going to pursue empire, or are you going to pursue this alternative vision for the world? And I can't help but think about, you know, I've been in church my entire life. I've been a leader in a church since before I was 20. And it just seems to me that we have, and I'm sure we can pinpoint it back in like the 4th century, right? But we have, as a movement, the Jesus movement, we have adopted those patterns of empire. So people come to church often looking for a prophetic message, and what they end up getting in lots of places is still more empire. Do you think that's true? Do you see that in the church, that the empire has sort of got its grip around it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really just so, even just our structures, the hierarchies, the way that violence is so interwoven into our language. I mean, you know, and this is outside of church, but it's obviously, it's all part of it. But you know, when we're doing well, we're killing it. You know, like when we did something wrong, we shot ourselves in the foot. You know, I mean, there's like violence, militarism, all of these things are so interwoven in our language, and that is not neutral, right? That is not neutral, because as I said earlier, it starts in our language, right? It starts in story. These are the stories that empire has told, and then they become ideologies, and ideologies become systems, right? You know, you think of just sort of these throwaway comments that we hear from people in power, you know, things that people just laugh off, and it's like, well, no, that's how things like misogyny and these are how all these things take root in us without us even realizing it, because as I said, empire doesn't always shout, it whispers, right? It shouts, and it also whispers. And so, yeah, we see it in our churches, the way that we understand, you know, even the incarnation, right? Like Jesus, you know, arrived to do his earthly mission. Everything's about conquering and arriving and sort of getting to this place of, you know, whatever. And we forget that the whole story is about the journey, right? It's never about the destination, but it's become that, right? Heaven is like the destination. And all of that, right? All of these theologies stem from empire, right? To put it simply. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think about the phrase sometimes, love conquers all.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't think love can conquer.
Right.
I think that you've taken love and done something else with it.
Right. Or like, I have masters of divinity. Really? I mastered divinity? I mean, that is so, every time I hear that, I just think of how ridiculous it is and how normal it is, right? I have a friend who she says, I call myself a mistress of divinity. And I love that. I'm a mistress of divinity.
And I think, you know, it shows up in the way that in some contexts, to be a good Christian is also to be a good American.
Oh, yeah.
Because Jesus was the greatest American who ever lived. I'm glad you got that was a joke. We're in front of the right crowd here today. But when that becomes the case, when faithfulness to God or Jesus or this tradition is intertwined with being a good supporter of the empire, I think we're in big, big trouble.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we take a couple questions in the time we have left?
Yeah.
Does anybody want to ask us a question? I'll try to repeat it so everybody can hear.
No pressure. This is a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what brought you to writing this book?
What brought you to writing this book?
That's a good, sorry, I'm uncomfortable in this chair. That's a really good question. So I actually had preached a sermon at Grace Point, Advent of 2021, and so I'm happy that Advent's coming up again. And I had just given birth to my first child, and I was feeling all of the things that you feel as a new mother in a system not set up for new mothers. And, you know, the sort of the messages of Advent, right? Hope and joy and peace and love, and even the image of the nativity of like, and I actually spoke about this a couple weeks ago if you were here, so sorry to give it to you again, but all of the, you know, the image of the nativity of like Mary, like just kneeling after giving birth, all dressed and clean, and the animals, you know, sort of, and you know, it's again, as I've been saying, like this isn't neutral, right? Like we have this image of holiness that is sterile, and this image of holiness that is, you know, put together. And I had just given birth, and I knew it did not look like that, right? It's bloody, right? It's profane, and I use that word specifically. It is profane, it is messy, it is primal, right? It is embodied, all of the things, all of the grotesque things that come with it, and all of the, what's the word? Things that offend, all of the offensive things about birth. And I'm looking at this, sort of, and I'm reflecting on the nativity scene with my brand new baby, and I'm thinking, this is so inaccurate, right? And again, that's not neutral. And so in my head, I'm thinking, like, this is the way that empire has constructed how we ought to understand even something like the incarnation, which is foundational to how we understand divinity. And it's sterile, and it's inaccurate. And so, to answer your question, I'm reflecting on this, and I'm wrestling with this, and I'm angry. You know, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'm always angry. And I'm angry, and I'm just, what in the world? And then I preached about it, and someone came up to me and said, Kat, you should write a book about this. So I did. I was like, okay, I have a lot to say about this. And also, you know, I've been studying post-colonial theology in the academy, which that's a whole nother thing. I can talk for hours about the academy. But yeah, so that's what sparked it, for sure. And then, of course, the hard part of writing it and then having to stop writing it in the world that we live in, I'm like, ooh, I could have put that in there. Ooh, I could have put that, you know, everything that happens on the news, I'm like, ooh, that's a chapter. Oh, you know, so anyways, yeah, that's part of it.
Let's do one more. Yep.
You talked about having to make decisions based on your own convictions.
Yeah.
So, for instance, moving out and having a farm and doing all those things. What's another example for you of that internal wrestling with empire?
Yeah.
So what's another example, like making decisions out of convictions, what's another example of that?
So we have a funny chant in my home. My 4-year-old, boo the broligarchs, boo the broligarchs. And we've sort of like tried to reorient our life. And I've had this conversation with Josh of reimagining in our family and in conversations with people, new ways of being together. And what I mean is, you know, we've tried to pay really close attention to where our money goes and where we shop, you know, and all the convenient things are, you know, we don't still go to Publix anymore, and, you know, all these little things, but really we're trying to stay so true to our values and our beliefs, and even with the smallest thing of where we spend our money, trying to narrow down all the choices that we have. Like, you know, my husband and I sat there and we realized we have like 8 streaming services. Why? Why do we need 400,000 options of what to watch, you know? And not that is anything, but it's this idea that you know, there's a scarcity of everything, and we just need to hoard it all, right? So those are just some little examples that we, you know, our day-to-day, when we wake up, we try and wake the kids up an hour earlier because, again, it takes forever for toddlers to put their shoes on, and we don't want to rush. And I mean, and it's just all the different convictions, and they change, right, with the seasons that you live in, and just the world, you know, where you're at. I don't necessarily see myself living on a farm forever, but right now I felt like this is something I want to pass on to my children. That work and hustle isn't everything, right? That tending to the land is, right? That's the things that matter, that slowing down, those are the things that matter, that getting your hands dirty, those are the things that matter. And so I imagine that it'll ebb and flow as my life changes and I'm in different seasons. But yeah, I just think, what are you passionate about? Creating art? How can you create? How can you, what are all the things that you feel drawn to? Obviously mine is writing. And so, but like, what are some of the things that you just feel convicted by, passionate about, and that you can start, doing that one drop, whether it's where you spend your money, whether it's, my husband and I talk about how we want to actually add some friction in our lives, right? Like we're becoming so technological that there's no friction. Everything, the whole purpose of technology is to remove every friction, every barrier so that you're just like a zombie walking through life. And so how can we add friction to our life? We talk about that. What can we do to make things a little bit more inconvenient, to force us to be more embodied, to force us, whatever it is. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
I will tell you that when they're almost 10, it still takes forever to put those shoes on. So that is the unfortunate.
Well, it's actually something else I want to say. So Josh and I had a conversation, we were talking about this, and I was like, let's say that I run out of diapers, and I did the whole reusable diaper for the first year, and then I just stopped because it's exhausting and it's a lot. So let's just say I run out of diapers, and what's the most convenient thing? Well, I'm gonna order diapers from Amazon because they get here at 3 p.m. And what's the alternative, right? Like we don't have better alternatives. Like what? I'm gonna go to CVS and put money in it. Like there's no really better alternatives. So we're talking about this, and we're both sitting there like, what do we do? And then I said, this is like a random practical thing. Like I just really needed a double stroller. Like I was traveling actually for this book tour, and like I just it would be helpful to have a double stroller. I just have single strollers. Anyway, so I said, what if we had like a space where everyone just like put what they had, and we can just like borrow each other's things, right? Like an axe, right? Whatever need there was, we just, hey, you have this. So anyway, we had this conversation. We're like, yeah, let's dream something. Let's do it. Let's reimagine. Let's get a Google Doc together. And we're like planning all this, Josh and I. And then I get into the car with my husband, who's a software engineer. And I said, I was just talking to Josh, and it'd be really cool. I kid you not, he opens his laptop, turns on the hotspot, goes like this. And it was an act, like he created a whole, and I'm like, yeah, that. And I say that to say that we all have our own gifts and talents, and, that we can all add to how we and that's what it means to reimagine. So we're gonna hopefully release it soon, and it's just called like Grace Point's Borrow Bin, and we just like borrow each other's things, and yeah, I don't know, and so when I say imagination, that's what I mean, right? Like, how can we use our imagination in ways that I don't have to like order a double stroller on Amazon? I just can borrow. I ended up getting one on Facebook Marketplace, but it was reused. But once the borrow bin is there, like we can just borrow each other's things, right? That is in and of itself a form of resistance. We're doing the Acts 2 thing. So, anyways.
Ricky, I want to invite you all to come on up. Ricky and Cassie have one more song for us. Kat, will you be back at your table?
Yes.
Kat has books. We'll be happy to sign them for you. Thank you for this good work. Thanks for the great sermon, but thank you for this good work you're doing. Can we thank Kat, everybody?
Thank you.
Bring us home, Cassie.
My feet are strong, my eyes are clear. I cannot see the way from here, but on we go. God knows the way, and in her arms she keeps me safe. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray, walk in shadows flee, the valley is deep, but evil cannot conquer me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. You give me rest, you give me peace. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray. Walk in the light of God's highway. I see the shore from these troubled seas, this tiny ship that carries me. It is not yet, but it will be. So heaven come, it's you we need. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray. Walk in the light of God's highway.
Y'all want to stand with us? Sing this together.
I'm holding on to you, love. You're holding on to me. I'm holding on to you, love. You're holding on to me.
Yeah, that's right. Sing it with us.
I'm holding on to you, love. You're holding on to me. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray. Walk in the light of God's
Sing, fear not.
highway. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray. Walk in the light of God's highway.
Grace Point, thank you so much. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Kat. We got lunch right over here. We love you. We'll have a good week. See you next time. Thanks.